Solitaire,
Apple Floppy Days,
Commodore,
Tandy Floppy Days,
Atari,
TI Floppy Days. The weekend comes, the disk drive hums, ready to code for you. These days we're all happy and free.
those floppy days,
The games we play, you shared with me.
those days,
Motorola, Intel 6502, graphics and text are there to view. Composite, color, or RGB, program fun for you and me.
Floppy Days is recorded in a live studio.
Inside PC Floppy Days, SD Amiga Floppy Days, Junior Sinclair Floppy Days, Classic Days, Microwaves, geeking all week with you. These days we're all happy and free.
those floppy
The
days,
games we play, you shared with me.
those days,
These floppy days are yours and mine. These floppy days are yours and mine. Floppy days.
Hello, and welcome to a special episode, number 54 of the Floppy Days Podcast. My name is Randy Kindig. For this episode, I'm announcing involvement in a new podcast that I'm very excited about. Peter Cetinski, a well-known figure in the TRS-80 community, as a result of some great software that he's written for the platform, contacted me and others about doing a podcast about the TRS-80 line. This is a major line of historically significant computers and has sorely needed its own podcast. I wanted to help kick off the new podcast and promote it, so I invited all the members of the podcast to come onto Floppy Days and talk about it. Please enjoy. All right, I'm happy to introduce the cast and crew of the newest vintage computer podcast on the block, TRS-80 Trash Talk. Known affectionately as the Trash Talkers, this team brings to the vintage computer community each month information about the TRS-80 line of computers, from the TRS-80 Model 1 through the 4P, the Model 2, the Model 100, the Pocket computers, and pretty much any computer produced by Tandy Radio Shack. So I want to introduce the members of this new podcast. First up, the gentleman who had the idea for putting this together to begin with, the creator of TRS Box and TRS Wiki software, and a gentleman who has Harry Mudd as his avatar, Peter Cetinski. Hey, Pete, how are you?
Hi, Randy. I'm doing well.
Next up, you heard this gentleman before on Floppy Days. He's the creator of the Mize and M3SE products for the Model 1 and Model 3. Peter Bartlett. Hey,
Hi, Randy.
Pete.
Hey, Randy.
I do need to explain we've got two Pete's here, so I'm going to call one of you Pete C and one of you Pete B, just so we don't get confused, if that's all right with you guys.
That's fine.
That'll keep me from being confused.
Okay. And finally, I have Ian Maverick, who is very well known in the TRS-80 community, is involved with the Fred product and many, many other products for the TRS-80 Model 1 and some of the other machines as well. Hey, Ian, how are you?
Hey, how do you do?
It's great to have you all on here. As I mentioned, really the purpose of this particular podcast is just to kind of introduce the Floppy Days listenership to this new podcast. I'm going to be involved in this podcast as well, and I thought this would be a good way to kind of kick it off. As of this recording, there's already been one recording of, or one publication actually, of TRS-80 Trash Talk, and there are plans for that to be monthly. But to kind of kick it off here, I kind of wanted to get a short history of each of the three of you. And I know a lot of the TRS-80 people are already going to know all of you because you do so much for the community today. But some of the listeners of Floppy Days may not be that dialed into the TRS-80 community itself. So I'd kind of like to introduce each one of you a little bit. So Pete C., could we start out a little bit and have you maybe just briefly describe your history with TRS-80 computers?
Sure. So I'm a relative newcomer to the vintage computing scene. I've only become involved probably in the past year and a half. And for some reason, I picked the TRS-80 as my platform of choice. I'm not sure if maybe it was the first computer I saw on eBay, vintage computer I saw on eBay, and I just fell in love with it, or what it was. But it just took off from there. I've always been involved with computers ever since I was, just a small lad. When the first computer I was ever introduced to was a TRS-80 color computer, and my brother got that for Christmas one year, and once I started seeing what it could do, I was hooked. And then I became a Commodore kid, and I got into the Ataris quite a bit, the Atari 8-bit machines. Had an Amiga on the way, then went the PC route that a lot of people did, and now mostly a Mac guy in my real life, real world job, but. So for some reason I've attached to the TRS-80 platform. I'm just fascinated with the history of them. I'm actually a really big fan of the business line of computers, actually even more than the smaller TRS-80, so like the Model 2 and the Model 12, which probably most of your listeners haven't even heard about. So it's kind of like a niche of a niche in the vintage computing scene.
So I'm curious, Pete, what does your current vintage computer setup look like? Do you have a collection?
How much time do you have?
So it's pretty big, I guess, huh?
Yeah, I've got, in my office upstairs, I have a Model 1, all decked out with a couple of floppy drives, and the mice is hooked up to it. I have a Model 3 with a Fred. I have a Model 4D with the M3 SE. And I have a Tandy 6000 HD with an external hard drive. And then down in the basement, which is my workshop, I have quite a few, probably at least 5 or 6 Model 1s and 5 or 6 Model 3s and a bunch of the big machines. So, yeah, quite a bit.
Well, that sounds like it's almost entirely TRS-80s.
Yeah, I do have, I have my old Atari from back in the day, and I have a couple color computers and a couple of others less well-known machines. For some reason, I'm fascinated by the Tomy Tudor, so I have a few of those. Yeah,
I've heard of that.
And but it's mostly all TRS-80s.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
So Pete B, like I said, we've had you on Floppy Days before, and I think we got a pretty good feel for your history. You were a big TRS-80 Model 1 guy. Is there anything you want to add to what you have done with the Model 1 or with the TRS-80s in general and what your collection looks like?
I mean, if anybody wants the details of how all this came about, obviously you mentioned that Floppy Days, and specifically Floppy Days episode 20's got quite a bit more information on what I've been up to. But I'm primarily a Model 1 guy, obviously, and my collection looks like my original Model 1 keyboard that my dad bought me in, I would have been in 7th grade. And that's variably either hooked up to a mice or hooked up to a sort of a bus extender device that goes to this back plane that I built before I built the mice. It's got every device I could think of to build for a Model 1 on it. Including the voice synthesizer clone that we'll be talking about before too long here. I've also, since the mice went over so well, and I sold quite a few of them, a lot of Model 3 and Model 4 people were asking me to make a device similar to the mice that would hook to those computers. So my wife's been pretty understanding, because now I've gone out and bought a Model 3, which is in another computer, another room near my office in the basement. And I've got a Model 4P, which is usually hooked up to a M3 SE. There's some controversy I heard from the first episode of Trash Talk as to exactly how that should be pronounced, and maybe we can talk about that on the second episode.
Okay.
But that's pretty much my collection, and I'm spending a lot of time just developing software and working on new pieces of hardware for those 3 machines.
Yeah, you're doing some great stuff, and I have to mention this. I don't think I've mentioned this on Floppy Days before, and I don't mean to embarrass you, Pete, but the episode that you came on is the most popular Floppy Days episode that I have had, and there's been approximately 3,000 downloads of that show alone. So
Yeah, I wish I had an explanation for that, Randy, but honestly, I have no idea.
It's just incredible. There obviously is a huge interest in the TRS-80 and with the products that you're working on. So, again, I didn't mean to embarrass you, but there definitely is a lot of interest there in what you're doing.
Yep, and there's plenty of new stuff coming up, software and hardware, so stay tuned.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then Ian, I meant to have you on the show, and I had actually had plans to have you on the show at some point, so finally, here we are. And I get a chance to talk to you on the show a little bit. So tell us a little bit about your history.
Well, the generation of sort of kids who used to go to Radio Shack stores and play around with TRS-80 computers wasn't just sort of confined to the United States. We had the Tandy Electronics stores here with the computers set up where people could mess around with them, and hopefully Tandy would go on and sell a whole bunch of computers. We were fortunate to have a store locally to me within walking distance. It was actually about halfway between my school and my home, so I'd actually drop in there most nights for a while and messed around with a colour computer. But this was right at the end of Model 1 production, and the more that I sort of messed around with the colour computer, and also as I was getting towards the end of my secondary schooling, I decided that a Model 1 had more of the sorts of features that I appreciated, because I was more into sort of science and data processing and calculations, mathematics and things like that. I also liked that it came with a monitor, and so I went for one of those, and have been sort of messing around with TRS-80s ever since. No sooner had I got it home that I was starting to write programs for local businesses and starting to make a little bit of money here and there. So fortunately, after a while, with each subsequent computer release, I was able to go and buy it. So that's how I ended up with my 3 and my 4 and my 4P, and really sort of kept working on those things and pushing back the limits of those machines as other more powerful DOS machines came along. I did end up buying a Tandy 2000 at one point as a platform to move out of the TRS-80 sort of realm, but never really did it in a business capacity. And then when I went on to university, we had a lot of people who, PCs were pretty standard then. We were talking about XT and 286 and early 386 technology, and I would just walk in with a 4P and I'd have all my software and things set up, and was just as productive with one of those for all of my university years. And then I've just sort of been ticking along with them until the retro computing hobby sort of kicked in as a global phenomenon, I like to call it. It seems to be a popular thing of people of my generation in their late 40s. And so and I looked at what I've learned and collected over the years in terms of teaching myself digital electronics and repairing and things like that, and figured I could carve out a small niche for myself for restoring and selling systems, as well as selling upgrades, and a lot of things sort of fell into place at the right time a few years ago, which is why I sort of take it very seriously now, is that getting circuit boards made became a lot cheaper, buying components online became a lot cheaper, so making a small number of devices or low volume devices isn't the financial sort of hole that it could be if they cost a lot more to make.
So, what does your collection look like, Ian? Or do you just have TRS-80s, or you have other computers?
At the moment, it's a great big mess. I'm just looking around my workshop here. I mainly have TRS-80s. They're what I mainly do. I do have a few Apple IIs, 2Es around here, and my own personal Apple II Plus. Because occasionally I get people who in Australia will send me their Apple computers to be repaired, and I can still do sort of component level repair on those. So I don't know anyone else in this country who's doing that, so I do that. But I've got, just looking around my workshop here, I've got my Model 4, my Model 1 and my Model 4D have all got Freds connected to them. The Model 4 itself sits next to the soldering station where I build all my equipment, and that becomes my Fred testing station. The Model 1 becomes the Quinterface and Fred combination testing station. The 4D is used for messing around with high-resolution software to see what works and what doesn't work, and then preparing it for downloads. And I've got another Model 4 in my garage, which is just sitting permanently with its motherboard exposed, so that each time I build a high-resolution board, I plug that in, turn it on, and then let it run test routines for however long, usually 5 or 6 hours. I mean, I like to think of myself as a collector, though, with the sort of stuff that I buy and ship out from the United States, and maybe 20% of it becomes part of my collection. 20% of it is too far gone and just gets turned into scrap, and the rest of it gets repaired or separated out into parts and sold to people all over the world. So it's busy enough. That's the best way I can describe. It's as busy as I want it to be in my life at the moment, considering that I've got a day job that I've got to hold down as well. So I'd like to be able to do this TRS-80 stuff full time, but it's just an enjoyable hobby at the moment that I can make a little bit of spare pocket money on the side.
Yeah, it'd be nice if our hobby paid well enough that we could do that full time, but I suppose it wouldn't be a hobby anymore if that were true.
That's true.
So, gentlemen, obviously there's some commitment involved in doing a podcast. I'm curious as to what each of you anticipate, getting out of this. What are you expect to get out of doing this podcast? Pete C., you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. So just briefly, why we started the podcast is essentially there were no TRS-80 podcasts out there. I don't know if there ever was one in the past. You guys may know better than me, but
I'm not aware that there ever was. But
yeah. So I when I got into the scene, the vintage computing scene, I started listening to all the popular ones, the Retro Computing Roundtable, and of course Floppy Days and the Antic podcasts, and they're all enjoyable. But except for Floppy Days, nobody really talked about the TRS-80. So I said, wow, it'd be really cool to start talking about all these subjects that I'm really interested in, and I think my main goal with it was just to find like-minded people to talk to and to enjoy the hobby with, whether it's the co-hosts that are joining us, or people that I would interview, or working on various segments for the show, forcing me to do the research on the software of the product and finding out who wrote that particular piece of software and trying to get in touch with them and meeting them and finding out about their history. That's all really fascinating to me.
Yeah, it definitely makes it a lot more fun.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I have to say, since I started Floppy Days, it's definitely been quite a ride. It's been very enjoyable, and with Antic, with having co-hosts, it's great too, because then you have somebody to talk with every month, about what it is that you love. So,
right.
Pete B., what do you hope to get out of being involved in this podcast?
Well, I'm looking forward to sort of almost being forced to learn a little outside my comfort zone about some of these machines that I'm not particularly familiar with. Like you mentioned earlier, the pocket computer, and I know Peter C. is very interested in the Model 2. And I'm also interested in covering a lot of the vintage peripherals that were made for these computers way back when, and hearing other people's fond memories and recollections of how they used them, how they remember them, other things they may have built, or just generally hearing other people's past with the various types of TRS-80s.
Excellent. Ian?
Yeah, I'm only in it for the money.
The money is great, I tell you. It's great.
No. You can cut that bit out if you want.
No. That stays.
Well, a few years ago, I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I discovered Dusty's TRS 8-bit newsletter, which is just the only newsletter still being published for the TRS-80, and there was no podcast at the time. And I just thought this is a really neat place to write stuff for, and I do like to write, though it does take a bit of time. So I've become a regular columnist for TRS 8-bit, and I still am. I've got to get my articles in over this weekend for Dusty, and I just see the Trash Talk podcast as an extension of that. It's more frequent. It doesn't require, well, for me anyway, that in what I'm intending to contribute to it, I'm not actually going to do a lot of planning or script writing or anything. It's just something that I can call in, talk, comment. People can ask me questions about history, my thoughts, how things vary from my country to yours, and I think that a lot of people out there are kind of interested to hear what I'm doing and what I'm going to be, contributing or designing and selling next. So, So I sort of thought this is a good idea, this podcast, and we can, slowly talk to other TRS-80 present day, luminaries and supporters. It would be great.
I have to tell you, I was so pleasantly surprised when I first came up with this idea, and I kind of reached out to everybody. I figured, maybe one or two of you guys would come on board, but when everybody came on board, I was like, yeah, this is really going to work out.
It definitely makes it fun. So, real quick, guys, I have to ask each one of you, out of the entire TRS-80 line, which I know was a lot of different computers, which one is your absolute favorite?
I'm going to pick the Model 16A. And I picked the 16A. Yeah, we're getting really narrow here. But because it was the follow-up to the successful Model 2 business computer. But it fixed a lot of the deficiencies in the Model 2. And so it had an upgraded power supply, and it had, the ability to run 16-bit operating systems. It's a dual CPU machine, so that whole architecture of the machine is so fascinating. But it's more compact than the later business models that followed, like the Model 12 and the 16B. They became larger machines, and for good reason. But I just have a spot in my heart for the 16A.
So, Pete B., I think I know what you're going to say.
I think it's fairly obvious that the Model 1 was my first computer way back when I was a kid, and I still just really enjoy the feeling of having the original keyboard, the original CPU that I had when I was in middle school, and that one's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Okay. Ian, how about you?
I use all of them so frequently, the 1, the 3, and the 4. I use them every day, each of them. I like the Model 4 the best if I have to sort of, pick one. I think they're particularly when outfitted with a Fred with its choice of operating systems and just basic reliability. They really got the reliability down pat on those machines. by the time they were producing that. I like my Model 1. Whenever I feel bored and want to play a game, I pull a game out on the Model 1 with its flickering phosphors on the screen. It's kind of, it's, if you're going to play a block graphic game, you want to play it on the Model 1. I like my Model 1. It's still the original one I bought, and it hangs in there. It actually, because it's been used consistently throughout its life, it rarely has problems. But like all Model 1s, it can just have a day when, for whatever reason, you go to turn it on and it just doesn't want to work. And you spend a lot of time sort of messing around, trying to work out why it doesn't work, put it all back together, and it works. And there's no reason why it didn't work, a couple of hours previously. And that's just part of the Model 1 experience. And I sort of say that to people who are interested in collecting computers. Any of them are a good starter computer. Probably the Model 4, my favourite, though.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and jump in here on that one myself. The TRS-80 model is kind of a tie for me between the Model 1 and the Model 100. The Model 1 was my first computer when I got, just as I got out of college. So I've got a strong love for that machine. But the Model 100 I have a strong tie to because my father used one to run his business. And I used to program that for him. And he's no longer around. But, I still have that strong tie to that machine. So I definitely, as we go through different episodes with the podcast, I'd like, a chance to occasionally talk about the Model 100 and just let people know more about that machine, because I think it's a pretty nifty machine. So
I think what we just talked about is really going to help make the podcast a lot stronger, because our passion kind of runs the gamut across the TRS-80 platform, from the Model 100 all the way up to the big 16-bit business machines. So I think that's really going to help.
Yeah. Okay. Well, gentlemen, that's all I really had. I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking about it. I want to say that I'm honored to be asked to be involved, and I will be happy to help out as much as I can and be on the show. And it's going to be great working with you guys.
Great.
Thanks, Randy.
Thanks, Randy.
All right.
No
worries. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
If you would like to listen to TRS-80 Trash Talk, and I certainly hope you do, go to www.trs80trashtalk.com for more information and show notes. You can also download the show at iTunes. Contact the podcast host on Twitter at TRS-80 Trash Talk, and there's also a Facebook page at facebook.com/TRS-80 Trash Talk. Pull out a vintage computer and compute as if it were yesterday. Bye.